Hello, my name is Corey Peterson, and today I'm going to be discussing Chapter 8, Planning Theory in the City by Susan Feinstein. Ms. Feinstein begins by explaining that courses within city and regional planning typically are split into three categories. The first is the object of planning, such as redevelopment policies or environmental policies, the context, which is structure of cities and regions or urban history, and third we have the process of planning, such as planning theory and planning methods. She explains that generally there's a division with the object and context courses having little reference to the theories of the planning process. She goes on to state that because there's a division within those courses, ultimately there's also a division within the planning theory courses, divided up between the socio-spatial constraints under which they do it, or the object that they seek to affect, both having little reference to each other. In her article, she argues that there is such a narrow definition of planning theory that it results in a theoretical weakness arising from the isolation of process from context and outcome. And she also states that the object of planning theory should be to formulate answers to the following two questions. Under what conditions can conscious human activity produce a better city for all citizens? And how do we explain and evaluate the typical outcomes of planning as it has existed so far? Before beginning her argument, she does state that she has three caveats. The first one, and lastly, when she uses the term the city, she is actually referring to any spatial unit as an object of planning, whether it be city or region. Feinstein begins by taking a look at historical roots and justification of the planning. The actual process became independent of the outcome, with polit- politicians deciding the outcomes and appointed officials determining the process of how they got there. Public input was relegated to the goals through these electorate representatives. Often, the goals of planners become misaligned with those of elected officials establishing public policy. This can happen for political issues as well as economic issues. Take, for example, in Hearst, with the expansion of the Northeast Mall um, 15 years ago, when a whole neighborhood was displaced in order to expand more stores. This could be shown as economic pressure in order to bring money into the city. Another example could also be with Texas Stadium, Arlington Stadium being erected where it was. Um, this could also be an economic issue that may or may not be in line with planners in producing a just city where everyone benefits. Furthermore, Feinstein also goes on to agree with Jane Jacobs in her book entitled Death and Life of Great American Cities, in which she argues that planners should not simply inquire what local residents think they need or want, since there's various degrees and levels of residents, that there could be too many conflicting desires, in that planners need to focus on what works as a whole instead of just individual groups. And explaining to the public as a whole through meeting and agendas. Another ideal in the context of planning is that everyone's opinions should be respectfully heard and that no particular group should be privileged more so than in any other. Now, unfortunately, this represents a problem um, of all interests in a large socially divided group. In actuality, there's almost no way to hear everyone's ideas for each group or demographic without having everyone in the society attend. Um, and there's also the issue of trying to have everyone attend so that their voice is heard. Just take as an example, how many times have you been to your local council meeting regarding any kind of planning? And finally, Feinstein ends the section of context of planning by posing a question of who owns the city, not in regards of assets, but more of a collective sense as of rights to employment, culture, homes, environment, living environments, education, personal security, and to participate in the governance of the urban planning. Another way to form the question would be to who has the right to choose for you what you want your city to be like. In order to try and answer the question who owns the city, Feinstein brings up an article by Max Weber entitled Politics as a Vocation, in which he distinguishes between an ethic of absolute means and an ethic of absolute end. The ethic of absolute means stresses tolerance and peaceful resolution of conflicts through negotiation, and the ethic of absolute end requires commitment to the overall vision and goals of the group. An example of an absolute end would be the government placing restrictions and protections on the environment from toxic waste, or setting up community-based facilities for disadvantaged populations, whereas in the absolute means, not necessarily could this have been negotiated. To quote Beauregard, he states that to realize a sustainable city, defined as one where environmental quality, economic growth, and social justice coexist, the city must be governed in a way that is attentive to the shared concerns of its people. In this formulation, governance is a means to an end, sustainability, rather than simply an end in itself. Once a goal like sustainability is determined, then it becomes necessary to theorize about this goal as well as about the strategy for reaching it. Um, Scott Campbell's article wrestles with the trade offs between environment, growth, and social justice and seeks to outline solutions that encompass all three. This would be an example of ethic of absolute means where it can be reached through negotiation. Um, in the end, to answer the question, who owns the city, it is more of both the population and the governance that determine what happens. Feinstein goes on to end her article by describing the kinds of theories that is needed to change. There needs to be interaction between procedures and outcomes, not just divided interests without one paying attention to the other. Planners also need to look at past city developments and relationships with economies, environments, and they also need to focus on character and critique of the past, what worked, what didn't work. She also states that businesses are now the stimulation of action within the economy, such as the case is Walmart having to plead their cases to come into cities to build their big box stores. Many cities are now standing up and saying that they do not want those big boxes in their within their city limits due to past instances of Walmart abandoning them and leaving them empty. Um, there also needs to be a marriage of mechanics and concern with outcomes and causes of outcomes. Another example of this would be the building at ground zero of, the post World Trade Center. Um, the outcome, of course, is a new monument, but planners also look to the cause of why they're there in incorporating the past, wreckage, debris, artifacts from the World Trade Center, and incorporating that into the outcome, which would be the monument. I end this presentation with a quote from Susan Feinstein. Planning theory ought to describe a goal along with the means of attaining it in the context which it rests. I believe that quote alone sums up the whole chapter, and I thank you for your time.